Dear students, GPS CLAT Academy at Gyanodaya, a senior secondary school at Sikar, supports its students in their CLAT preparation. We have started a lecture series which will be delivered to you on a daily basis on YouTube. The lecture series revolves around discussion of mock papers. You can request us for the concerned mock papers. If you intend to join us in our daily discussions, you are most welcome.
So, passage talks about antimicrobial resistance. Antibiotics, they are anti-life. They are poisonous to the infection which has entered human body. They will kill the good biotics as well as the bad biotics. Both of them, both the biomes, they will kill, and therefore they come with side effects. They also come with resistance. I mean, the once you administer it to an organism, and the organism survives despite the administration of the drug, and the organism will survive if the drug administration is defective. Suppose 5-day prescription is there and it is discontinued after 2 days. So the microbe which was supposed to be eliminated by the prescription of the drug survives. And once the microbe survives, then the progeny of the microbe will have the resistance to the drug built into their genome, and this goes on building. And if the intake of unsupervised intake of the drug keeps continuing, then the drugs will have an unintended consequence of generating superbugs, super microbes, which will not be amenable to to the administration of usual medicines, the antibiotics. Therefore, we have to ensure that the incorrect consumption of these antibiotics is stopped, and the problem has already assumed monstrous proportions. In absolute terms, the numbers affected are very huge. So the Kerala government, in the circumstances, has come forward with an action plan, and they seek to eliminate the self prescription of antibiotics within a period of time. And as per their scheme, they they have initiated a multi-pronged program, and the author advocates for widespread awareness, and which can take place more effectively via schools, hospitals, anganwadis, gram sabhas. At every step, the people must be made aware and sensitized to the proper drug use, and no drug abuse, and no faulty consumption of the drug. Non-prescription non-prescriptive consumption of the drug should be strictly prohibited. So these are basically the main highlights of the passage. And now let us come over to the questions. Which of the following, this is 100% correct, so we need not correct. Then 112 is also correct. Only one question. 113 doesn't seem to be correct. It would most strengthen the main argument in the passage. Which of the following if would most strengthen the main argument in the passage? Kerala recruits additional drug inspectors to improve monitoring and enforcement capabilities. Yes, the author says that monitoring and enforcement capabilities should be enhanced. So this will be there. Second is antibiotic consumption in LMICs increases sharply due to lack of regulation. Antibiotic consumption is, what is this LMIC? Can you tell me what is this LMIC? Just look into the passage and tell me what is this LMIC, if you can.
LMIC means low and middle income countries.
Where is it? In which passage?
So in second passage, which starts from the optimum use, there you
Just,
can see
just 1 second. Just 1 second.
in eighth line, second passage, eighth line.
Second passage, 8th line. Okay. Low and middle income countries. Okay. Antibiotic consumption in low and middle income countries increases sharply due to lack of regulation. Lack of regulation and also lack of awareness. Not only lack of regulation, but also due to lack of awareness. So this partly strengthens the author's argument. Author's argument is about lack of regulation, but author's argument is also about lack of awareness. Ambiguity in legal penalties continues to hinder pharmacy compliance. This ambiguity in legal penalties. Does the author talk about ambiguities? About legal, yes, drug inspectors are overworked. He says that. So to that extent, this also goes to strengthen the author's passage, this thing. Then public ambiguities in legal penalties continues to hinder pharmacy compliance. Yeah, I think ambiguities will impact. Where is it in the passage? Can you show me? Where does it say that ambiguities in the what is the argument about ambiguities? Here it is. Author suggests that success hinges upon this one. Can you see this? Success hinges on multi-pronged behavioral, educational, and legal overhaul. First, the clinicians must be trained to delay antibiotic prescriptions. This should become part of medical curricula and clinical practice. Accredited social health activists and primary health workers must educate the public about the dangers of misuse and leftover pills. Mass awareness campaign. All right. Then he talks about finally the legal regime needs a serious upgrade. Yes. Finally, the legal regime needs a serious upgrade. Drug inspectors are too few. Sanctions are top-down and reactive. Instead, behavioral incentives are tighter, and tighter compliance systems are needed. And Kerala may be setting the example, and so on and so forth. So he is saying that legal regime needs a serious. Sanctions are top-down and reactive. So there are sanctions are not appropriate. Sanctions are there ambiguous sanctions. Clinicians, solemn should medical curricula and all that. I think these are the ones. These are the main this thing. Ambiguity in legal penalties continues to hinder pharmacy compliance. This also goes to strengthen the author's argument. Public awareness campaigns have limited reach in rural areas. This seems to be tangential. So, which are the correct ones? A, B, C. All of them seem to strengthen the author's argument. Now the challenge is which one to choose. Now you tell me which one will you choose? Manishka, yes. Priyanka, say something. Don't fall silent. If you fall silent, it will hurt us very badly. Please don't fall silent. Keep speaking.
The answer should be option A.
Why?
Which of the following it will most strengthen the main argument in the passage? And
Hmm.
the main focus in this passage of author was on option A only. That's which is basically that Kayla recruits additional drug inspectors to improve monitoring and enforcement capabilities.
Main focus is also on spreading awareness about the potential ill effects that antibiotic overuse or unregulated non-prescriptive use may bring about. So, but then he's not talking about those things here.
But in all these four options, we can see that B and D are clearly not related. They are very unrelated, and uh, and between A and C, I found option A more appropriate.
Because ambiguities in legal penalties continues to hinder pharmacy. This also strengthens. But then this will
But
be
option E is creating both aspect of improving monitoring and enforcement capabilities.
yes. So this one seems to be a little more this thing. Though the choices are really very close. If you look at it in that short span of time which you will get between A and C, and when there are things like C that are also written there. So that was one question that was not properly handled. And now we are on the next paragraph. That is the Convention on Biological Diversity. Yes.
So this passage talks about the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which was adopted at the UP15 in December 2022 to guide the global biodiversity conservation efforts. And it set the four overarching the goals and 23 targets to be achieved by 2013, aiming for the world living in harmony with nature. And there is a protect 30% of land and marine area by 2000. Also reduce the overconsumption and food waste by the 50% and increase the biodiversity funding.
Your voice is drowning in between when you are speaking. I mean, it is coming, but then it drowns and then starts coming once again.
Ensure the fair access to genetic resources.
Mhm.
Some indigenous group fear displacement due to like the protection of biological diversity. The CF urges rather than the mandates actions. Global biodiversity framework controlled by the Global Environment Facility.
So this article says that in 2022, during the COP15, countries adopted the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework to protect nature, and this was done on the 13th anniversary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, and this Convention on Biological Diversity is different from other treaties because it includes three goals, which is conservation, sustainable use, and sharing of benefits. And it also gives countries control over their own biodiversity. And however, many developed countries have not followed the Convention on Biological Diversity, and they ignored the key articles such as failing to prevent biopiracy and not sharing technology or supporting research in poorer countries and not helping with funding or taking responsibility for biodiversity damage. And some rich countries say that CPT is not legally binding, and even though they never said so in official meetings, and the US rejected the treaty altogether, and despite having originally proposed the idea, the new GBF plan, which started in 2023, it has 23 targets to meet by 2030, and these include the restoring 30% of damaged ecosystems, reducing waste and harmful subsidies, and increasing funding. And but the GBF is not legally binding, unlike the CBD, and it doesn't cover all the original treaties' key promises. And there are also concern about financial control and the Global Environment Facility, which is run by the World Bank. Uh, it is managing the money instead of CBD scope, and developing countries fear this setup continues global inequality and weakens the CBD. And one of the ZB targets, which is to protect 30% of land and oceans, it has also faced criticism, and indigenous communities worry that they will be pushed out of their lands in the name of conservation. And in short, while the GBF is a step forward, real change will only happen if the original promises of the CBD are respected, and developed countries should take responsibility, and uh, local communities should be included, and they should not be harmed. That's all from my side.
Yes. So basically, the Convention on Biological Diversity. As you see, the biological diversity, the South happens to be very rich in biological diversity, particularly the area of equatorial rainforests. The countries on equator are very rich in biodiversity, and therefore the biodiversity. And why biodiversity is important? Biodiversity is important because uh, it helps us in many ways. It helps us in the way that one, the balance in ecosystem is maintained. If the biodiversity is there, if the biodiversity is rich, means the ecosystem is healthy. If the ecosystem is healthy, then the diseases, the epidemics which break out from time to time, their control comes usually from nature. Even COVID-19, when it broke out, the control came from the animal species only, by study of the behavior of the virus in animal species, in which it was in the form of a carrier, or it did not carry out those complications in some animals. So the cures come from biological diversity, ecosystem health. The biological diversity is a marker of the ecosystem health, and if we take a ecocentric viewpoint, then we will find that we are also a part of the ecosystem. If we are also a part of ecosystem, then in that case, if the biodiversity health is compromised, then we being a part of that biodiversity, then we are also going to be compromised in our health. That's why so much importance is attached to biological diversity. But at the same time, the constraints of development are also there. So many, hunger is widespread across the globe. Therefore, development also needs due emphasis. The author says that the Convention on Biological Diversity, on the paper, it looks very fine. It marks a genuine attempt to arrive at some kind of compromise between the environmental goals and the developmental realities. And but the way in which it is implemented leaves must be desired. Then he says, goes on to chalk out the history of the biodiversity convention. There have been several plans, and the latest plan is the GPF, they call it, Global Diversity Framework. And he says that it is only a framework, means it is not legally binding. He says that the it has been intentionally kept legally non-binding, and he also criticizes the conferences which take place pursuant to this convention, to the Convention on Biological Diversity and the GPF. Basically, they are saying that look, they are not taking any concrete action on breaches of the Biodiversity Convention. They don't take any concrete action on non-fulfillment of the targets under the convention, and they don't take any action on the biopiracy that takes place, that the lower income groups or countries uh, can be easily their sovereignty over the genetic resources can easily be compromised. Those kinds of issues. So the more than the funding kind of issues, the transfer of technology kind of issues, the more important kind of issues which should be taken up for implementation are never discussed in the conference of meetings. Author seems to suggest that all this seems to be intentional, that the industrialized world, and that is the north, and the uh, and the and the south, the industrializing south, or the less developed south, are basically having a sort of conflict of interest in management of biodiversity. The the industrialized south north basically seeks to push its consumptive patterns, and the consequences of those consumptive patterns in the form of global emission of carbon dioxide and harmful gases. Now, because of which global warming has become a threat. In the face of global warming, it is imperative on the developed countries to own the responsibility for the damage that they have wrought on the environment. However, this is not the actual situation on the ground. The developed countries are very reluctant to take the ameliorative steps. They are reluctant to share the resources. They are reluctant to share clean technologies to avoid the harmful effects of emissions. Therefore, this is a very unequal world. Then the yet another part of inequality or inequity that comes out is from the treatment of the indigenous people. Treat the indigenous people. They say that you should increase the forest cover. The original forest cover on the earth was 75%, which was subsequently reduced to some 60%. At present, the forest cover is severely compromised, because 75% was the norm for the health of ecosystems. But now it has come very drastically down by 15%. But The implication that the author says is that this would fall on the indigenous people, and that they will be uprooted from the core areas of the forest on which they rely for their livelihoods. So this debate between North and South, and further debate, um, further conflict of interest, the further trade-off between environment and the livelihoods of marginalized communities. So this is what is the subject of author's comment. And first one is correct, so we need not bother. Second one is also correct. Third one is also correct. Fourth one seems to be incorrect. Which of the following have to the most weaken the author's arguments? The Global Biodiversity Framework adopts enforceable mechanisms for compliance with CBD's operative articles. Most weaken the author's arguments. Enforceable mechanisms for compliance with CBD's operative articles. So, if true, if this is true, suppose Global Biodiversity Framework adopts enforceable mechanisms for compliance. So, with CBD's operative articles, this would most weaken the author's argument, or this would strengthen the author's argument? Can you see the question? I think you can see the question. I'm talking about 118. Let us discuss this aloud. Let us discuss this aloud.
Sir, I got this wrong. I marked the option A.
It doesn't matter. Whatever is your argument, just put it forth. That A, B, C, D. This is what is your position on each one of these. You know. Yes.
To strengthen the author's argument,
The GPF adopts enforceable
because
mechanisms. Yes.
it seemed to strengthen the biodiversity conservation and
Yes. He says that author says that GPF is non-binding, and if it becomes binding, that would strengthen the author's argument.
Yes, sir.
All right. Then next. Come to the next one. Developed nations agree to transfer technology as per CBD Convention in Biodiversity Article 16. So this is going to weaken the author's argument or strengthen the author's argument. The author seeks to make an objection that these countries are not doing enough. Then civil society continues to fail in its watchdog role, aligning with Western agenda. So if the civil society continues to fail, then what happens? Aligning with Western agendas. Then the main argument of the author is this only, that the non-industrial South should assert itself, should align, should see their interest, and thereafter hang on together if they want to seek concessions from the developed world, right? And if they continue to fail, then this is going to bring about a loss for which the author cautions us. Then developing nations reclaim control over biodiversity funds from the World Bank. So if developing nations are able to reclaim the control or biodiversity fund from the World Bank, then this is exactly what the author says, that the world has lost out its control to the World Bank. It is World Bank managed Conference of Party of the Biological Diversity Convention,
Sir,
Biodiversity
but
Convention.
option C is supporting the author's argument.
She is supporting the author's argument. First,
Yes, sir.
let me finish this one. Developing nations reclaim control. If developing nations reclaim control, then what is going to happen? Suppose developing nations are able to reclaim the control, then he says this only, that that these decisions are not taken in the Conference of Parties. These decisions are not taken in the Conference of Parties. These decisions are taken in the World Bank, and the World Bank is managed by the United States. In other words, Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank and the IMF, they are under the United Nations control. So this seeks to strengthen the author's argument or weakens the author's argument. If developing nations are able to reclaim the control, then this is exactly what the author is also suggesting, that you should do that. And if they do that, then would weaken the author's, strengthen the author's argument. Now, if we come to C, do you agree with me? Yes or no? Civil society continues to fail.
Sir, I think this will weaken the author's argument because in this passage the author says that the basically the West countries, they are the developed countries. They control the biodiversity funding, not the developing nation. So, in this option, it is said that the developing nations reclaim control over biodiversity funds from the World Bank, which is basically weakening the author's argument. So, it can also be the correct answer.
Look, there are two ways of looking at it. What is the main argument of the passage? What is the main author's main argument?
I think the main argument of the author is that the CBD goals are being less effective, undermined because of the developed countries,
Hmm.
because of their poor implementation, their selective adoption, and their financial control. And the West continues to dominate, and the developing nations are left out.
Yes. So these are basically the arguments of the author, right? That the clear north-south divide is visible, and the north is dominating over the south, and the north is foisting its exploitative capitalism, the consequences of its exploitative capitalism in the terms in the degradation of the environment, as is reflected in the state of affairs in the in the subjects under the control of the biodiversity convention. Okay, so this is what the author says. So with this lens, anything which goes on to support the author's argument, anything that goes on to lend credence to the author's argument, then we have to discern that only. Which one weakens, which one strengthens, right? That is where the entire love lies. Now you are saying developing nations reclaim control over biodiversity funds from the World Bank. You suppose our developing world nations are able to reclaim the control, and this is what he also says, that they have taken away the control. They have invested the control in the World Bank. This should be in the conference of parties where the where the number of developing countries is far larger than the developed countries. If you have it subjected to voting, this is what the author says. If you have it subjected to voting, then in that case, then if there will be a more equitable world, the funds will be readily available if the funding decisions are taken in the conference and not in the World Bank. You following what I'm saying? So in this scenario, if this kind of thing happens, that they have reclaimed control over biodiversity funds from the World Bank, then in that case, this will strengthen the author's argument.
So, but in this passage, it is said that the West is dominating there. West is dominating biodiversity funds, not the developing nations. And the
Yes,
West is basically the developed nations. That's why it will strengthen the.
yes, that creates a problem. Now you see, West developing nations claim control over their biodiversity funds from the World Bank. What does it mean? It means that the decisions are taken in the conference of parties. The author's argument is that the developing countries have controlled it, but now the decisions should be taken in the conference of parties. The decisions should not be taken in the World Bank. And he says that World Bank, from the World Bank, the developing countries have taken away the dominance or the steering of the funds. Then in that case, obviously, it would go to strengthen the author's argument if this kind of thing comes about. We will when we do more and more, we will get clarity on this new medium of strengthening and weakening. Right? Let us go to the next one. Civil society continues to fail in its watchdog role, aligning with Western agendas. So civil society, if it fails in its watchdog role, so Western agenda is very clear that don't allow any substantial work to take place in the Convention for Biodiversity because it entails financial implications for us. Western agenda is very clear. And now the civil society, that is a conference of parties which is comprised in the Convention of Biodiversity. This thing gets split because before the agenda of the world, before the agenda of the developed countries. Now it says continues to fail.
So option B also become the author's argument.
We'll come to that, but first focus on option C. First, you focus on option C, which we are discussing, and contribute on that. Say that no, yes, that this could probably, that way only you will develop the knack of by doing some kind of loud thinking on some of these questions, on the at least those questions which go incorrect. because your presentations are okay, but the application of that presentations is not okay. That is why I am spending more time on this, so that we think aloud. Those things which we are not able to manage, we should focus more on those things, right? So now please come on C. Just elaborate on the C choice and see how it strengthens and how it weakens. Civil society continues to fail in watchdog role aligning with Western agenda. Now, what is Western agenda? Western agenda is keep the developing countries divided. Don't let them present a united stand. Don't let them a, have a role in the management of funds. Don't let them come together and strengthen their voice for transfer of funds, transfer of technology, for owning up the responsibility for causing the pollution. All right, for causing the global environmental damage, of which the Convention on Biodiversity is also a part. So that is what where they have pushed their responsibility for the pollution that they have caused. But they are not willing to take commensurate steps in mitigation of the situation they have brought about. That is what is the Western agenda, right? Now he says civil society, which is represented in the conference of parties, which is when there's so many countries and their representatives come together, that becomes a sort of civil society. Continues to fail in its watchdog role. So the conference of parties does not rise to the occasion and does not.
Option C strengthen the author's argument.
This is what we have to look at. This is exactly what we are looking at. Civil society fails to control the Western agenda. That is what he says. He says, author
So
says
the
that the
option is saying that civil society continues to fail in its watchdog role, and they are basically aligned with the Western agenda.
yes,
They are not against the Western agenda.
no,
They are following that. That's
no,
why.
no. What he means is that look, the issue is with funds. Issue is with accountability. Issue is with respect to the adaptation and mitigation measures. Issue is with respect to transfer of technology. These are the major issues, right? Biodiversity convention. The most important agenda is the funds. All right, the fund management in biodiversity. How the fund management takes place. Now he says that the Western agenda is to evade responsibility. Now, this is the reality. What is the author's argument on that? Let us examine what is the author's argument on that, right? Let us just see what is the author's argument on this. This is the reality, he says, right? Just please refer to the article.
So in this passage, the author basically says that the Western countries are dominating and the power and control remain in their
Where are you
control
reading?
only.
Where are you reading? Show me from the text. You can show me from anywhere because it is all written all over the passage.
So that's basically the context of the passage. Wait a minute,
In
I
which
got
part?
his
In which
closed
part?
the window
In
accidentally.
which, where are you reading? I'll just draw your attention to this. Last but one paragraph. You can point out many places in the paragraph, not only this one, but you can point out several places. If you see this, putting the same institution that is guardian of the skewed economic architecture in charge of the new fund, rather than the democratic conference of parties, can only exacerbate the biodiversity. So what is he saying? He's saying that he's building up an argument that you arrest the control of the fund. He's building up an argument that you control the civil society. You civil society, you regroup and you strengthen yourself. You don't get divided amongst yourself. All right. This is what is his argument. What is the argument he's building? The argument is please stay united. Please don't fall. Please don't become co-opted in the Western world's agenda. Please have your own agenda. This is the argument that the author posits. Yes or no? If you look at putting the same institution that is guardian of skewed global economic architecture in charge of the new fund, right, rather than democratic conference of parties, can only exacerbate the biodiversity crisis. So you have to have your own agenda. You have to have your own fund manager. You have to have a say in management of that fund. You have to have your society, civil unity very strong. These are the arguments he is building. You following what I'm saying? That is what for he makes a passionate plea. Do you follow what I'm saying? His argument, try to see what is the argument that he puts forward. This is the prescription he gives, that please stop this. Don't become compradors. If you look at the last line, they are compradors in the global south are willing partners. West is busy causing this destruction. What destruction? This year. The capitalist mode of infinite exploitation within a finite system carries the seeds of its own destruction. That is number one. West is busy causing this destruction. They are destroying. They are compradors in the global south are willing partners, but the south is also become a partner with them. That should not happen. That is what is the argument, that we should not allow that to happen, but we should allow the institutions to run democratically. The voice of the marginalized people should also be heard. The fund management also in the same way, the fund management should be democratized. All these things he is talking about, right? And if he is talking about all these, then this thing which is being said continues to fail in its watchdog role. So they have continued to fail. That means they are already failing. An author is building an argument that you have your own watchdog role. You strengthen yourself. You reclaim the biodiversity funds. You assert the transfer of technologies. You assert the enforceable mechanisms. You know, these are the things he is talking about. But if anything happens to the contrary on the other side, then that would go to weaken the author's argument. Yes or no?
Yeah, I'm still not getting the answer.
We are not getting the answer. What is the main? You'll get the answer very shortly. What is the main argument of the author? Tell me. You tell me. CBCD is not actually being followed. That is the main argument.
Yes, sir.
So what is the argument?
And sir, in this
Wait,
passage,
wait,
it is
wait.
clearly
You don't
it
require
is
so many instances. Wait. It's a technique.
sir, in
Wait.
this passage, it is clearly stated that the West basically sidelined the
Sideline.
where is that
That
line?
is
I
exact.
still
Sideline. So what should
they
happen?
sidelined the things that were not in their favor.
Yes. So come to the next
They
step. What should happen?
sir,
So what is the
it is
author's
in
argument on
the
that? Try to understand. Try to come with me.
it is not
Now,
clearly stated, but we can imply that the West is dominating. They are
what
sidelining
is
the
dominating?
articles that
Yes.
are not in their favor, and the
Perfect.
US is rejecting the
No, wait.
treaty.
No, wait. No, wait. Wait. That is enough. What you have stated is enough. So the argument, implied argument is that the West is dominating. And what is the author saying? That they are dominating. This is not correct. This is exactly what he is saying. You
Yes,
following?
sir.
This is the
And they
whole
are not taking the
entire thrust
accountability.
entire thrust of the argument, author's argument is that it is iniquitous, it is not fair, it is not equal, it is not proper. That is the entire thrust of the author's argument. Yes or no? That is the
Yes,
entire.
sir.
So now let us examine if that is the thrust of the author's argument, and the what is transpiring in these choices is contrary to the author's expectation, then that should weaken the author's argument.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So civil society continues to fail. Now that is what weakens the author's argument, because the author's argument is that you don't fail. You come together, you put a united front, you get the funds, you get the technology, you get the ownership of the conference of parties on the agenda of the on the agenda of the convention on biodiversity. So you get all that. And if you don't get all that, anything that does not go get all that, anything that goes in the contrary direction, just like civil society continues to fail, goes in the contrary direction, that is going to weaken the author's argument. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So, Priyanka, what is you did not speak? I think this was Tanishka who spoke. Tanishka, intervene maximum.
But option C is supporting the author's argument. It basically says
Yes.
that the civil society fails to complete its role in watchdog role, and they are basically aligned with the Western agenda, and that's what
All
author
right.
said that.
All right. All right.
It's going to
All
weaken the author's argument here, where civil society group are supposed to hold government accountable, and some are also following the Western interest. instead of acting independent, and it's making harder to protect the local interest.
Yes, yes, correct. Tanishka has followed it. Anyway, I will take you through the article, and then because if you, I'm very happy that you are coming back on this question again and again. You are raising doubts. I'm very happy about it because if you understand this, means 30% of your problem is resolved so far as logical reasoning is concerned. If you can understand a few of these articles properly, the reasoning, the propositions, and the inferences from those propositions, then I think our job is solved to a large extent. I'll just read through the article. Please, please look at your article, either in your screen or on the screen which I'm sharing. So I'll just go through it. Actually, when I start a screen share, then slightly hangs and then it starts. So that is why this time lag comes in. Now he says, the Convention on Biodiversity was marked by adoption of Global Biodiversity Framework, GBF, now called Biodiversity Plan, by the 15th meeting of the Conference of Parties in December 2022, Conference of Parties. The Convention on Biodiversity is finally, so this is a statement of fact, there is nothing to argue in it, is finally balanced between conservation and development objectives. So there is a fine balance that it maintains. That's also okay. This is a statement of, this is an observation, marking a departure in the domain of international environmental law by incorporating the triple objectives of conservation, sustainable use, and equitable benefit sharing. These are the main objectives. While the previous generation of international conservation treaties remained focused on protectionist approaches, now they will protect their consumerism, but now it has changed. Now they are talking about sustainability, they are talking about conservation, they are talking about equitable benefit sharing. Convention on Convention on Biodiversity Formation negotiation took place in 1992. The initial draft articles prepared by IUCN legally recognized biodiversity as a global resource and made access to biodiversity be made open and free, and put in place a treaty that recognized national sovereignty over biodiversity and access to biodiversity made conditional, namely informed prior consent, mutually agreed and equitable terms of benefit sharing. Now these are the parameters within which the Convention on Biodiversity was negotiated. However, the fairness in North-South balance embedded in the treaty made the West uncomfortable with it. See the article. See the argument that he is trying to build. He says that these were the laudable objectives with which the convention was started. West very quickly became uncomfortable with the convention's provisions. Why? They began selectively choosing articles for domestic implementation and for consideration by CBD, carefully sidelining the articles they do not favor. While the United States took the candid position of rejecting the treaty, the United States, which was the mother of the convention, did not ratify the convention at all. This is what he is saying. Selective exclusion of CBD articles from the attention of Conference of Parties and from enforcement with the confirming support of Secretariat was the strategy that
So
worked well.
we can imply that that option from these lines only.
Yes, that is what I'm saying. So what he is saying is, what was equitous became inequitous in implementation. What was perfect on paper, when it came in reality, it was not what it was in paper. Therefore, if anything, but then he says that what is the remedy for all this? Then he says how this was brought about: biopiracy due to failure of compliance, failure of most developed countries in taking legislative. Biopiracy was not checked. Biopiracy benefited the developing countries, the developed countries. The developing world is rich in biodiversity resources. So what do? You take patents on the biodiversity of the on the involving the biodiversity of the south, and don't share the money or on the royalty of out of the patent exploitation. So that is called biopiracy. Then no technology transfer that was supposed to be done by you. You did not do that. So this is how you have, over a number of issues, over a range of issues, you have skewed the entire debate in your favor by ignoring all this. You ignored the liability, equitable sharing, and sovereignty on the genetic resources, and all that you just ignored. You just did not allow that to enforce. Then he talks about digression in the treaty, digression from the treaty. He says that then the goals were never achieved. The goals were the targets were never actually achieved. CBD is a binding, while GPF is not even binding. JPF is merely a framework, and therefore this framework and the verbiage in which the obligations are spelled out is also very tentative in its. There is no mandatory requirement. As far as possible, wherever appropriate, please do it. All these verbiage is there, right? The enforcement part is highly diluted, and the Western world has taken full advantage of all that. Then he says, GPF sets a pathway to achieve a vision of world living in harmony with nature. It has four overarching goals, 23 targets. It urges parties to bring all parties under biodiversity, including inclusive spatial planning, bring the loss of biodiversity rich areas and important ecosystems close to zero, and restore. And these are the targets. This is what he says. Then what happens? Also addresses ignored critical pandemic issue of human wildlife. That's also all right. That's also he does. Then there is the financial mechanism on which he says, all right. Then the financial mechanism we have discussed at length, that the financial mechanism is highly skewed global economic architecture in charge of the new fund rather than the democratic conference of parties. So it is the conference of parties which should have been in control because of the initial laudable objectives of the convention, but now it is it is vested in the hands of the World Bank, an agenda of the industrialized world, in order to hijack the convention on the biodiversity, because it shoulders them with responsibility somewhere. The climate crisis and biodiversity disruption are likely to cause extinction of the industrial civilization. Then he says that all this is not going to do the Western world also. They are not going to get away with it, because and the South is also not going to get away with all this. They sooner or later they will have to pay the price for exploitation of something that is finite. You can't go on indefinitely exploiting what are finite resources. So he's talking about sustainability here. So he says that all those objectives which were there have actually been weakened, and we should act to please protect the world and not become willing partners with the industrialized north. So this is essentially the argument. So the author's argument is what? He takes note of the situation, and then he develops a critique of the situation, that we need to take certain steps. And suppose those steps are not being taken, then the author's argument becomes weak to that extent. If the fact corroborates the steps that the author suggests, the kind of approach the author suggests, then that goes to strengthen the author's argument. Therefore, if the global north starts transferring technology, global north starts being accountable for sharing of genetic the benefit sharing in case of genetic resources, exploitation of genetic resources. If the global south starts owning up responsibility for the mitigative measures to be taken to arrest the evil consequences of the environmental change that is coming about, if the global south acts in an equitous way, then all this will go to strengthen the author's argument. Whereas if the global south, if the global south itself becomes a party to the west and assists it in hijack in its exploitative capitalist agenda, then in that case the author's argument stands to get weakened. Is that okay now? Do you follow? Priyanka, Tanishka, do you follow or you do not follow? What is the author's argument and what is a statement of fact? What the author takes as a statement of fact, these are two distinct things. What the author intends, what the author implies, what the author intends to achieve, that becomes his main argument. The fact may be what you are looking at is the fact, the statement of fact that he makes. He makes a statement of fact that this industrial civilization, the conference of parties does not share or does not own the management, does not have ownership control over the funds. Then conference of parties does not Most of the agenda is outside the conference of parties and invested in Western institutions, which have basically been founded by the countries of the global north. So the beneficial aspects of the global convention on biodiversity are never able to fructify or self-realize, but they are all the time they are only frustrated, and the global north is able to have its agenda on its own terms. So this is the author's argument, and whatever is contradictory to the author's argument, that goes to weaken it, and whatever steps are taken pursuant to that argument, that goes on to strengthen the author's argument. Is that clear to you? Nobody is speaking. Very faintly. Very faintly. Anyway, we will have more opportunities over this. So don't worry. This one is 118. This we have done. 119, you have marked it correct. Then there is JETP. Focus primarily coal phase out. This seems to be a new article. Please wait.
So this passage talks about the Just Energy Transition Partnership.
Yes.
Is funding the mechanism designed to help the coal-dependent developing economies and the transition to clean energy while ensuring the social and economic justice. And it is also help in the countries to move away from the coal energy and transition to the clean energy. And it is funded by the US, EU, and Japan. And it also ensures that livelihood protection for affected workers. But here India is hesitant to due to impact on the coal sector job, and the JTP mainly target the coal phase out, ignoring the other fossil fuels. And our developing nations need more financial support for fair transition, and it's including the oil and gas in the transition plan. And India alone need a $170 billion annually for the clean energy goal, and ensuring the economic stability while shifting to renewables.
So this passage explains that the Just Energy Transition Partnership, which is a plan made by the rich countries like the US, EU, and Japan to help coal-using developing countries move towards the cleaner energy resources. And this plan is supposed to be uh, just meaning it should not harm people's jobs or local communities. It should be fair, and countries like the South Africa, Indonesia, and Vietnam have joined this plan, but India has not joined this plan because a large number of people in India depend on coal for their livelihood, and India is worried that leaving coal quickly could hurt its economy and workers. And the passage also says that the plan is mostly focused on coal, and other fuels like oil and gas are ignored. And the India says that it's unfair because uh, and no, basically. Uh, the other fuels like coal and gas are ignored, and these fuels are mostly used in rich countries, and uh, these fuels cause a lot of pollution, and also the money promised by the rich countries to help developing countries uh, when they switch to clean energy is too little, and the rules they set are sometimes unfair, and this plan sounds good, but it needs to be more fair, and it needs to include all fossil fuels, and it should give more support to the countries that need help making the switch, and that's all from my side.
Yes. So basically, once again, just like the Convention on Biodiversity, this article also talks about the Just Energy Transition Partnership, JETP, Just Energy Transition Partnership, they call it. So the 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 way it has been worded, just the use of the word just implies justice or equity or lawfulness. But then the author criticizes the Just Energy Transition Partnership as highly unjust. It is highly unjust because it does not take into account two things. Number one, it is highly skewed in its approach. It does not talk about the phase out of all the fossil fuels. Why only coal? Agreed that coal undoubtedly is the most polluting out of diesel and petrol. Diesel is 7 times more polluting than petrol, and probably coal is the most polluting of them all. So, but then all of them are polluting to a lesser extent or to a more extent. Even the CNG, even the LPG, all these are also polluting. So, what the author the argument that the author posits is that why do you single out coal? Why not have a treaty which has a has an agenda on the table which prescribes the timelines for phase out of all the fossil fuels. Why only this one? This one should be there. Why not phase out all the fossil fuels? So that is one of the aspects that is not provided for. And this kind of arrangement, this kind of treaty, which they call as Just Energy Transition Partnership, basically it compromises India more than it does any other country, because India is heavily reliant on coal, whereas the developed countries are reliant more on natural gas. They are not so much reliant on coal. The natural gas is far less polluting than coal. That is correct. But nevertheless, they are polluting, and we have already crossed the 1.5 degree beyond the pre-industrial levels. 1.5 degrees centigrade we have already crossed, and you can see the impact of that in our rapidly changing environment. How hot it is, what kind of heat waves are blowing. Just imagine when it gets worse and worse, what kind of situation will come about. The situation will become almost into beyond maybe beyond what we call as it will test our resilience. It will test our capability to cope up with. So the author seems to suggest that, look, why not talk about everything? Why do you talk only about coal? We can't. We are at such crossroads that we can't afford to pollute more. We can't afford to generate more and more greenhouse gas emissions, because the situation has already undergone drastic adverse developments, and further adverse developments should not be allowed. But then that is possible if the approach is holistic, and approach is not merely pole centered. Pole centered means India centered. India has a very huge population which is employed in the coal sector, in the thermal sector, and therefore we have to have proper mitigation plans in operation. But the proper mitigation plans are highly disproportionate. They are very underproportionate. They don't provide the kind of finance that is required for the mitigation of the problems, or the mitigation, or rather the switching to the new this thing will require far more funds than what are actually forthcoming. Therefore, India would not like to sign in on the commitments to this, because India has a huge responsibility, and the convention does not. The Just Energy Transition Partnership does not seem to meet the requirements that India has for making the transition. So this basically is the article. Once again, the article is on the global and the global north-south divide. That the northern countries with their agenda, with the cleaner fuels, are basically compelling the global south to do away with the lesser what we call as switch to alternatives. But then those alternatives are expensive. and the coal is relatively cheaper. That's why this is the mainstay of our energy production. And we import 85% of our hydrocarbons needs industry. And therefore, this can slow down our economic progress. And unfortunately, our economic progress is leading to is directed towards uplifting our masses out of poverty. It is not directed towards making or gathering more and more affluence. But India is locked in the process of uplifting its masses from poverty, and this comes in the way of our development. And our emissions are livelihood emissions, whereas whereas the Western society seems to be more consumerist in its outlook, whereas Indian society is more sustenance oriented society, and therefore if we take into account all these factors, then the global north should also be willing, equally become a willing partner, and phase out their reliance on the fossil fuels also, and make a just transition, and not merely burden the third world countries with the cost of reducing the environmental damage that has been brought about. So this is basically what the article talks about, right? And the burdens and the responsibility should be equally shared. It should not be the sole responsibility of the global south to repair the historical damage that the global north has inflicted on the environment, and that they are presently talking about just partnership, when the entire burden of the partnership falls on countries such as India and other third world countries, right? So, having said that, let us examine the questions. Now, I expect you to be slightly more articulate on the questions, because if you are sufficiently articulate when it comes to presenting your, your understanding of the passage, you should become equally articulate in understand projecting your, presenting your. The JETP focuses primarily on coal phase out rather than an inclusive transition from all fossil fuels. This is correct. Then developed nations have a significant reliance on oil and gas as bridging fuels. Yes, this is also correct, right? So this A seems to be the correct answer. I hope you agree with me. Yes or no? Then why is it
Yes,
given
sir.
that A is not the correct answer? Coal phase out, and they developed nations have significant reliance on. They don't have reliance on coal. They have the oil and gas as the bridging fuels, and whereas the coal phase out is being talked about. Coal phase out is for the developing countries basically. So the entire environmental transition, the cost of environmental transition should be falling on the global south, and oil and gas are bridging. So they can afford to make the transition at a very low pace or no pace, because they are bridging fuels, right? So the entire so A and both are correct, and R explains A is the correct answer. But I don't know why. Let me correct it then and there. Just give me 1 minute. Let me correct it also. Okay. I got confused. It is 66%, 0.7% means two kids have answered it right and one kid has answered it incorrect. What I saw is that this is not the correct answer that he has marked. I got a little. Then there is 121. India is reluctant to join JTP due to potential social impacts on its whole sector workforce. This is correct. Then India's coal sector employs a significantly larger workforce compared to other participating countries. This you can easily check from the passage. If it is not there, it is there. They are significantly larger workforce is there compared to other participating countries. This seems to be correct.
Yes, sir.
Of course, this is there. So there is nothing to discuss here. Please come to the next one. I think it is 120, 122. What can be inferred about the necessity of an inclusive approach to energy transition from the focus on coal? What can we infer? What the inclusive? Is it inclusive? What do you say? It is not inclusive, right? Narrow focus on coal reflects developed nation selective priorities. That is correct. Then inclusive energy transition is essentially for global equity. Is essential for global equity. That is also correct. Transition strategy should balance. This is also correct. So all of the above are correct. This is 100%. This is once again 124. Do you agree with the idea that JETP represents a shift from accountable multilateralism to market-based plurilateralism? So only two choices. Only two choices. But how could it be? I'll see later on why there are only two choices. Do you agree with the idea of JETP representing a shift from accountable multilateralism to market-based plurilateralism? Is that correct? What do you mean by accountable multilateralism to market-based plurilateralism? What do you say? What is the difference between market-based plurilateral and accountable multilateral? Can you tell me?
Yes, sir. It basically means that the option should be answer should be option A, because it says that they are, instead of focusing more on other aspects and market-driven priorities, they are just focusing more on the developed nations and their priorities.
Yes. Plurilateralism means a few. Multilateralism means many. Okay. Plurilateral and multilateral. That is the difference between that. Accountable means when you are talking about phase out of entire fossil fuels, then you are being accountable. You are not being selective. You are being inclusive. But when you are talking only of coal, which is predominant fuel for the industrializing southern hemisphere, then in that case you are being exclusivist. You are being market. You are playing to the market mechanisms. You are nodding the market. Market-based plurilateralism means you want to work the market in your way. How will you work the market in your way? The economies of the global south will get slowed down further, and this will be an advantage for you, so that you can their industrialization will be checked, their progress will be slowed, their efforts at bringing about parity of trade, parity in terms of other aspects, with their efforts will become tardy, slow, and you will be able to take advantage out of that. All right. Chaliye. So that is not accountable. Debate whether disproportionate, this is correct, so I don't need to bother. Then this is also correct, so I will not bother. Correct, so I will not bother. Not bother. Not bother. Then there is passage 15. This we have already done. So this finishes our 65th passage, right? 65th passage. I will always say this thing that look, in the questions, be a little more cooperative. You are very, very cooperative when it comes to making presentations, and I wholeheartedly welcome that. And I can see the benefits also of the students. All students have benefited. Rayan has benefited. Kanishka has benefited. Priyanka has benefited. Everybody has benefited by being
Sir,
vocal. Yes, Kanishka.
sometime I have to summarize the passage from the co-pilot actually.
Nothing wrong with that. If you don't understand the passage, then you can get the summary from the Copilot or ChatGPT, and then try to understand the passage, main arguments in the passage, and then come back to the passage and read it once again, so that your understanding develops. That is the only way you can develop. What else is the way out? But when you are attempting the question paper, then don't apply that. I mean, I did not understand the question. Let me open a parallel window and find out what is the easy of this. No, then try as hard as you possibly can to try to guess what is the meaning of this, what is the meaning of that. Try to pressure your mind to deliver the comprehension that you want in order to address the question. Mark it incorrect, doesn't matter. We will deal with it with the lack of correction here. Not a problem. But while you are marking the test, you may get 50. But today, if you get 50, tomorrow you will get a 90+ performance in the main test. It makes no difference here. The whole idea of giving the tests is that it makes your reading very sharp. It makes your reading, your laziness goes out of the reading because the element of examination is there built into it, right? So very good if you are using these technological tools to, after all, see what we are doing in vocabulary within a fraction of a second. I remember we used to spend hours and hours trying to build our vocabulary through a dictionary. We used to do that literally in order to get our vocabulary. But then how you people stand to gain within a fraction of a second. Whatever used to take hours and hours building vocabulary when there was no internet, when there was no, and even in internet, it is not that easy. Copy, paste, first you have to put the word and then you have to, see the list. And if you put the list straight away in internet, you will not get the answer. But this ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, Bard, all these are very, very, very productivity enhancing tools. They make you very productive. They help you produce more and more work within less and less time. So they are very fantastic productivity tools. And why we should not use them very liberally in in advancing our careers, in advancing our comprehension? We should use them. What is wrong with that? You must do that. Right? But just to take the exam in exam conditions. When you sit down for the test paper, then let yourself mimic the test conditions. That look, I have to do it at the earliest possible. But at the same time, don't leave any part of the paper, even if you overshoot the time. Pressure yourself to perform within 2 hours. If you are not able to do it, give yourself 10 minutes more. Give yourself 10 minutes more. Give yourself 10 minutes more. That way, keep yourself on the edge and keep pushing and pushing so that you come closer and closer to the higher performance, right? Now, having said that, please participate a little bit more on understanding the questions. You have successfully done it when it comes to the passages. That's all right. I welcome that. Just come a little bit more, be more forthcoming because you have mastered the passages so well. Then what is the problem in applying all that? And when you become more and more vocal in the application part, then you will become more and more nimble in your thinking, right? You have to apply, you have to speak more. You have to speak more in the questions that look, this will not be correct, that will not be correct. This seems to be more appropriate. These and these are similar, these and these are dissimilar. These strengthen, these weaken, these are the necessary inferences. And all that has to go on continuously in a not in a monologue sort of fashion. Presently, I am already going through it, but now it is improving. We have already seen that, and I'm sure when you will have done sufficient number of them, then these will not be a problem for you. This kind of thinking will not be a problem for you, right? All right, and of course, key lies in the consolidation. Everything lies in the consolidation. How much you consolidate. I will not leave any number of newspapers. I'll give you full exposure of whatever is appearing in the newspapers. And in other places, so many articles are taken from the Economic and Political Weekly. And those articles are far, I mean, they are rendered in better language, more pitchy language. So that gives you better comprehension and better reading. Now, having said that, Priyanka, your result has come. Priyanka, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Your result has come, and I think you will make it. But I think you will make it towards the lowest entry point.
Yes, sir.
You
I
have
got
nearly,
1 marks increase in my result.
you got 1 mark more.
Yes, sir. But
So
there is slight difference in rank, nothing much.
yeah, I can understand that. So, but then you will get something, I think, because 20% of 5,000 ranks or so are there, and 20%, 5,000 intake is of 5,400 something, if my mind serves me correct, or it is 4,000 something. 4,000 intake is there. 4,000, I think, I don't know, 4,800 something, 5,000 intake is there.
Sir, but
It's,
this time there is only three lists. Three lists will be out, not the five at like previous one.
no, that is because the time is short. They have to
Yes,
start the
sir.
session. That is not, they will try and finish up the process in three lists
And
only.
sir, did you hear that the consortium will be dissolved?
Consortium is going to be dissolved.
Yes, sir. There was a petition filed by advocate, and he said that the consortium should be dissolved. And even in the hearing of this CLAT case, uh, the judge also pointed out that the this board is examination conducting body is not working properly. There is every year there is a petition filed by the students. Because of the flaws in their work, their questions, their answer key.
But then I have not come across any finding that the consortium should be dissolved.
No, there was the a petition also petition was also filed, and the judges also said that the if we will watch this case and we will decide if the consortium should be dissolved or not.
Maybe. But then
I
I'm not.
was watching
I'm
that
not
hearing live. That's why I know.
you're watching the hearing live.
Yes, sir. I watched that hearing. Uh,
No,
by
That,
the
that
WebEx only.
that doesn't mean anything. That kind of arguments, all kinds of arguments are heard, and all kinds of arguments are presented, and all kinds of observations are made. That doesn't mean anything. That means nothing. What is finally is the printed word that comes in front of you. Right? So consortium dissolution seems to be such an absurd idea. There has to be a single body. Just imagine why the consortium was formed. You have to appear at 27 law examinations of different institutions. So this is inimical to student interest. Right? This is very bad for student interest. If you have to appear at 27 different law entrance examinations, what a headache it is. How much money will be spent? How much will be the cost in appearing on at all those examinations? It will be a havoc with the students, and then there will be a crossings. I mean, there will be an overlap. Today,
Sir,
the
on 23rd May, there is a hearing about this only, dissolution of consortium.
all right. Maybe that if no, they will continue with the hearing of the case. They will continue with the. Anyway, I have not watched the hearing live, so you may be better informed on this. I have only seen the newspaper items as they have been appearing, and also I have sent one or two to you, also shared with you. So I'm not aware of what happened, transpired in the court. But then, this seems to be a little far-fetched that the consortium will be dissolved. It will be a very retrograde step if they do it. Anyway, that we are nobody to second guess what the Supreme Court judges may do. They know their work. They have the petition in front of them. We don't have anything in front of us. But from a student perspective, this would be a very retrograde step in dissolving a national body which conducts a national level competitive examination for the benefit of all students at one entrance examinations matter comes to an end, which is very fair, which is very nice for the student body. So anyway, whatever the decision the Supreme Court will take, I'm sure that will be in the to further the student interest only. They are custodians of public interest, and they will take whatever appropriate steps. But then you seem to be likely to get some rank in this thing. 20% reservation, 5,000 seats. That translates to, I mean, 20% of 5,000 is how much? 20% reservation, 20%, 20 of 100 multiplied by that is nearly 1,000 seats, right? 20%, five parts, so 1,000 seats. And your rank is which one? In OBCs, your rank is which one? 1,000?
In 1200s,
Oh,
1228.
and if you miss, then you'll miss by a very narrow distance. If you go by the logic of 20% reservation, then at least 1,000 students should get it. Anyway,
So what
we
the dissolution of the consortium, they give it to NTA.
NTA is no less. What a havoc they created of the
I
NEET
think
exam.
it should be given to the Bar Council of India.
Bar Council of India. Anyway, let us see. Let us examine. Let us see.
But they are not able to conduct the AIB very well. So
Because these
Yeah.
ends become a nightmare for the students.
They have all kinds of bodies have some problem or the other. Anyway, let us see. It will be very curious to watch the developments. They will be reported very soon. ठीक है बेटा, फिर let us meet tomorrow.
Thank you, sir.
Okay बेटा, bye bye.